Welcome, Robert Hoot Gibson. This is the National Medal of Honor Center in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and we're having coffee with June.
I love it.
So, Hoot, I have to ask the first question. I mean, this is the man who has flown everything. Sometimes you see it on quiz shows. What man has flown the most airplanes? The answer is Robert Hoot Gibson. Hoot was in the first class of astronaut shuttle pilots along with my husband, Dick Scobee, and they were friends. Dick had been Air Force. Hoot was Navy. They didn't mingle too much with each other, these Navy Air Force people. But my first question that everyone's dying to know is, why is your nickname Hoot? Because you are a hoot?
Well, no, it's what I tell everybody, June, is I'm not worth a hoot. And so that's how it came about. No, actually, the way it came about, I was signing into my squadron aboard the USS Coral Sea in April of 1972. Oh. And the operations officer said to me, "Well, kid, I was 25 years old. He said, "Okay, kid, have you got a nickname?" And my real name's Robert, so I said, "Oh, yes, sir, it's Bob." And he said, "Oh, come on, I mean a real nickname." And I said, "Well, occasionally I've been called Hoot for the cowboy movie star, Hoot Gibson."
Oh.
So that's where it originated. So Hoot Gibson was world champion cowboy, I think in the year 1912. And he went into movies, cowboy movies, and since he was a real genuine cowboy, he did all his own stunts. Oh. And so anybody my dad told me that for a while in the Army Air Corps, he had the nickname Hoot.
Well, I can tell you, maybe since you're no longer flying the F-14 or the F-4 or what, he pulled a lot of stunts. He had quite a reputation when he came to NASA with his stunts. I mean, someone said you flew under a bridge.
No, I never did.
That wasn't you.
I never did fly under a bridge. Now, there was a pilot, J.C. Smith, who wound up losing his wings, I understand, for flying under the San Diego Coronado Bay Bridge. But I never flew under a bridge.
Okay, good. Yeah. Good. You're a good, safe pilot.
I may have had other stunts, but that was not one of them.
So he flew the F-4 and the F-14. F-14. I knew that. I was just testing to see if you remembered.
Yes.
F-14. Tomcat.
The Tomcat.
And then he became a fighter pilot, test pilot. Well, he was a fighter pilot, test pilot, and then he became a Top Gun.
Oh, graduated from Top Gun. Yes.
Yeah, Top Gun.
Yeah, and it's funny. June, when I went through Top Gun, there was nobody there that looked anything like Kelly McGillis. But, hey, none of us were as good looking as Tom Cruise either. And so, I guess that's a fair trade.
But I bet they ask you, your audiences, did you know Tom Cruise?
I've never met Tom Cruise. I would love to.
Are you asked that question?
I am asked that question, yes.
Did you know? Yeah. Well, we were all certain that you trained him. Okay. And all he did was sit in the seat, and act.
Well, he's a real genuine pilot. He has his own P-51 Mustang, which was in the latest movie, Top Gun Maverick.
Yeah, okay.
And I thoroughly enjoyed that movie as well. And so, yeah, he's a real genuine pilot, and they don't let just anybody fly a P-51 Mustang.
Well, what some of you may know is this Navy pilot flew 300 landings on a carrier.
Just over 300 carrier landings.
Carrier landings. Now, my Air Force husband flew one. He said that it's like looking out there and seeing a postage stamp that's that you're supposed to land on, and it's moving around in the waves, it's swaying. And so you line that up and go in there and land on that while it's doing all of this?
If it's moving, and say you're in the middle of the Indian Ocean, which I was in the Tomcat, you either land there or you wind up in the water. And so you have two choices, and only one of them is a good choice. So, and I've had some interesting times landing in the middle of a thunderstorm because the carrier has to be steaming into the wind because you've got to have the wind down the landing area. And so the wind, when there's a thunderstorm, is flowing radially outward, so the ship is always steaming into a thunderstorm if there's one there. And so I've had some interesting landings where you got to 3/4 of a mile and the approach controller says you're 3/4 of a mile, call the ball, and I couldn't see anything but rain. And you'd say Clara, which means I can't see it, and the LSO would say, well, you sound good, keep it coming. That means he can't see me either. And eventually you keep that same rate of descent. Eventually I found the carrier and landed on it successfully. I was glad I didn't have to go around and come back into that again.
Hoot, look, and Desmond is his partner. Desmond was a Navy guy on carriers.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Oh, wow, we are brothers in arms, Desmond. Fantastic. Wow.
That's terrific. Well, I mean, it wasn't enough that he was going Top Gun fast. He had to try something a little faster and higher. So he joined the astronaut crew in 1978 and was selected as one of the best pilots to join them. How was that, moving from really fast Top Gun to a slow office job at first in the NASA office?
Well, fortunately, June, we got to fly the NASA T-38s, and oh golly, that made everything great. And we weren't overly supervised with the T-38s. Now they expected good judgment. They turned us loose and said, okay, you're checked out now in the T-38. You can sign one out, and you can go fly it somewhere. We expect you to not push weather minimums or amount of fuel, and things like that. So they entrusted you and they expected you to exercise good judgment. And it was wonderful flying the T-38s because it only took 3 hours to go from Houston all the way to the West Coast. Now you couldn't stay up that long on a T-38, so we flew Houston to El Paso, refueled, and then to California.
Okay.
But that only took 3 hours total, and we were budgeted for 15 hours a month. So and that's a cool airplane. It cruised
Yes,
at
it is.
9/10 the speed of sound,
Well,
0.9
it's a
Mach.
trainer for the Air Force.
It's a supersonic trainer.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, great airplane. And of course we got to work in the simulator some, but I spent 4.5 years in what I'll call basic training before I was assigned to a crew.
Oh.
And then you will spend, every time you're assigned to a crew, you spend 12 months training for just that one mission. So, and you saw that, of course.
Yeah. How many missions did you have in space?
I wound up flying 5 times altogether. And I wasn't planning on doing the 5th one, June, because after my 4th mission, I was promoted to chief astronaut.
Oh.
And oh, what a blessing that was. I was so, I didn't know what to say. What a tremendous honor that was to be the leader of the astronauts. I had 113 astronauts, including my wife, although she insisted that she didn't work for me. And we played that game, and I said, yes, you do. I'm the chief astronaut, you're an astronaut, so you work for... She said, no, I don't, so don't even try and tell me what to do. But I wasn't planning on assigning myself to a mission, because that was my job as the chief astronaut, was I picked who got to go fly. And I was asked when I first pinned on chief astronaut by Space News, said, oh, you know what, Hoot, 2 years from now, the first docking to be done by a space shuttle, it's going to be with the Russian space station Mir, will be coming this way. Are you going to assign yourself to that mission? Well, I launched off into my speech about that is not the purpose of a leader, to skim off the good deals for yourself. I will not assign myself to that mission. So then come 2 years later, I picked out a crew for that mission, a really good crew. And it was being held up. NASA wouldn't let me go forward with it. And finally, my boss, director of flight operations, called me on the phone. He said, Hoot, they really like your docking crew, your Mir docking crew. And I said, great, yeah, that's a great crew. He said, with one exception. Well, in the 2 years I was chief astronaut, not one of my crews had been messed with, because nobody knows them better than I do. And I didn't know what to say. There was just dead silence. And he finally said, they want you to command it. And I said, oh, no. I said, Dave, it was Dave Leesma. I said, Dave, for 2 years now, I've been telling people I'm not going to sign myself to that mission. I don't want to do it. Steve will do a fine job. I had a good Air Force commander picked out, Steve Nagel. Steve Nagel.
Yeah.
And he said, okay, I'll try again. Well, anyway, long story short, he finally called me one day. I delayed it for about a month because I didn't want to do it. I've been telling people I'm not going to give myself that mission. And he finally called me and he said, Hoot, do me a favor. I said, sure, Dave, anything. He said, shut up and go do the Mir docking. And I said, okay, Dave, I give. All right, if you'll come over and make the announcement and say why this is happening. So I wound up doing that 5th mission, and it was pretty fascinating. All those years that I trained as a cold warrior to shoot down Russian fighter pilots, now I'm training with them and flying with them in space. It was really interesting working with the Russians, and my crew and I, for the Mir docking, traveled to Russia twice, once in September of '94, and we were over there for about 11 or 12 days, and so we got to meet a number of the cosmonauts, and of course, in particular, the ones that we would be flying with. We went back again in March of 1995, and then we had a bunch of the cosmonauts that came to Houston to train right before we launched. So we had the 2 that I took to space, Anatoly and Nikolai. Anatoly Solovyev and Nikolai Budarin. Anatoly was a Russian MiG pilot, and of course I was a Navy fighter pilot. We had trained to kill each other. We had trained to shoot each other down all those years. And so it was really kind of fascinating to work with them. And what I found, June, was that I really like those guys.
Yes.
They're just like us.
The Russians, yeah, they're
They
just like us.
they like flying in space. They like flying jet fighters. I took Anatoly flying in an NASA T-38. So he was in the back seat, I was in the front seat, and we got up over the Gulf, and I said, Tolya, Tilatayesh, which is, Tolya is the nickname for Anatoly. Tolya, you fly. And so he took the control stick, he shoved it into full afterburner, and right up to 6.5 Gs, turning and burning, straight up, straight down, going every which way. And I just let him do it. And that's what I would have done if he had given me the controls of a Russian MiG, which I've flown some of those, by the way. But they're just like us. They like pulling Gs, they like going fast. They were nice guys. Now, their management, who I met over there in Russia, they were not as nice as the cosmonauts themselves. So I really got to like those guys. And I'll give you one more story. When I docked with the space station Mir, Russian, and Mir is a Russian word that has 2 meanings. It means peace and it means world, as in peace on earth and world. And the reason I know all this is because my crew and I had to learn to speak Russian.
Oh, spasiba.
Oh, da, конечно. However, I are an engineer, and engineers ain't taught good in English, let alone in Russian. So learning Russian, or any language for that matter, is tough for me. So here's what I know best in Russian. Я говорю по-русски очень плохо и понимаю ничего. Which is, I speak Russian very badly and understand nothing. And I will usually start off any conversation in Russian by saying that, just so that whoever I'm talking to doesn't expect too much. But I had Anatoly and Nikolai on board Atlantis with me, flying to space, and if I needed to talk to them, then I needed to talk to them. They couldn't speak English, and Russia was so poor back then. This is 1994, 95. They couldn't afford English teachers or textbooks, so we had to make the effort. And we had an interesting gal who was our teacher, Tatiana. She had grown up in Moscow, and she came to Houston and was one of our teachers. And she was not the slightest bit impressed that we were astronauts or that we're going to be doing the first docking with the Russian space station. She expected us to know our Russian language lessons. And she would look at me and rattle off something in Russian, and I didn't have a clue what she said. And I'd just stare at her, and she'd say, "Well?" And I'd say, "Moya samaya lubimaya muchitelnitsa," which is a play on words. Moya samaya lubimaya is my most favorite, and if it were uchitelnitsa, that's teacher. But if I put an M in front of it and make it muchitelnitsa, that's my most favorite torturer. And so she'd say, "Niet, ni muchitelnitsa, uchitelnitsa." So we had a lot of fun. We had a great time. But it was interesting when we got there and we docked. The protocol was I'm to open the hatch, which I did, and shake hands with Russian Air Force Colonel Vladimir Dezhurov. And we shook hands at the hatch, and the President of the United States saw that on the downlink and announced that this handshake marks the end of the Cold War. So I tell everybody, I ended the Cold War.
Good. Well done.
It makes a funny story.
Thank you. No, but it could be true.
And it did. It greatly reduced tensions. We need a little bit more of that now.
Oh, yes.
But it greatly reduced the tensions between us and the Russians.
Oh, good.
And so we worked very well with them, and they worked very well with us, except for their management. So anyway, it was a great experience.
Yes, I'm certain. Norm Thagard flew with the Russians to the Mir, and before we could fly the space shuttle to the Mir. And when he came back from his first trip in about 84, 85, I said, "That was a major international flight you had." He said, "Well, I don't know if you could call it international. We flew in a Russian spacecraft. We watched movies in English on a Japanese VCR, dubbed in Russian."
Well, I brought him home.
You brought him home that time.
I brought him home. Yeah, I took Atlantis. He launched in March of 95, and I launched the end of June 95 and picked up Norm and 2 Russians who had been up there for 4 months.
Yeah.
And I was their ride home.
Aw.
So that was the completion of that. So he launched on the Soyuz, and then I picked him up with Atlantis. So
Well done.
yeah,
Brought Norm back.
that was quite an adventure.
You mentioned your wife earlier. I met Ray Sudden, just like I met all the rest of you new space shuttle pilots and mission specialists. She was one of the mission specialists. She's in the whole picture of the crew. She's this beautiful blonde woman sitting next to Dick Scobee. I checked that out. She's adorable. And reporters, I hope it's okay to share this story, Ray, but it was reported in the news everywhere that reporters were saying, "You're such a beautiful woman, why aren't you married?" And she answered, in the newspapers anyway, she answered, "When I meet a man as interesting as my career, I'll consider it." Her career, she was an emergency room medical doctor, so she was a fascinating person. Is that right, Ray?
And a general surgeon. She had completed a residency in surgery. So she was the most accomplished medical doctor that NASA ever picked to be an astronaut.
And at Vanderbilt, good old Tennessee hospital. And she's from Tennessee.
Born and raised in Murfreesboro, Tennessee.
Murfreesboro. Okay. Ray, this is home. Hoot, how many of the shuttles have you flown? How many different shuttles?
I flew 4 of them because I flew Challenger on my first launch, which was the 10th launch of a shuttle. Then I flew Columbia on my second launch, which was my first trip as mission commander. Then I flew Atlantis after we lost Challenger. And then I flew Endeavour And all I needed was Discovery, but I flew Atlantis a second time. But my wife Ray flew Discovery on her first mission. So between us, we flew all 5 shuttles.
Well, good for you. What talent, family talent. And I met their first child, and he was brilliant too. I think how many children did you two have?
We wound up having 3 kids, Paul, Dan, and Emily.
Ah, how wonderful.
It was one.
Well, they were called astronauts.
Yes. Yeah, the press called them astrotots.
Yes, yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, when you were chief of the astronaut office, what was that like? Because George Abbey, who was he chief, or what was his title?
He was director of flight operations and then director of flight crew operations.
Flight crew. He, I was talking to him one day, and I asked him what it was like to be working with all these astronauts. And he said, June, they're all brilliant. They're all used to doing everything as a leader. And for me to be their leader, it's like herding cats.
Well, George was one of those people that you either loved him or you hated him. I'm sorry to say there were a lot of people that really disliked him. Right. Now, he treated me pretty well, and so I guess I was one of his boys. Although when I was chief astronaut, I butted heads with him a number of times because he was wanting me to do something that I thought was not right.
Okay.
And so there were at least 3 times in that business when I was chief astronaut that we bumped heads, and that I basically refused to do what he wanted me to do. He didn't fire me. I think there was enough mutual respect going on there.
Okay.
And I greatly respected him, but sometimes he'd want you to do something that wasn't the best thing for your boys and girls. And one of the things that you learn in the Navy was leadership, and you are there to take care of your troops. You're there to take care of your boys and girls. And so I saw myself as the chief astronaut. My job is to take good care of all of my astronauts. Even though one of them claimed that she didn't work for me, my wife.
Oh, beautiful Ray. That was like a marriage made in heaven. Everyone was so pleased to see that marriage take place.
Golly, yes.
And that she did meet someone as interesting as her work.
Well, no, I think she finally just had to settle for what was there. I think that's actually what happened.
Oh my goodness. So this man flew fire. He was a fighter pilot, Top Gun pilot, test pilot, space shuttle astronaut, and then when he retired, he flew commercial airplanes. Now tell us what that transition was like, because instead of just flying for fun, you are flying steady for the passengers. I hope.
That was a whole new and different challenge, June, because I couldn't just, in my jet fighter, if I suddenly said, oh, wait, I'm supposed to be over there, I could just reef it around. And you don't reef airliners around. You fly them very gently. And the challenge that you're faced with is you want to make your passengers feel like they are sitting in their living room. So they don't want excitement. I like excitement in jet airplanes. Your passengers do not.
No.
They don't want to be excited. And this is flying a great big giant trash hauler around is what it is. And you would think that wouldn't be fun. It was fun. It was fun because it was a different kind of challenge. You couldn't make rapid, quick movements with it. You had to be calculating and predictable and smooth and steady all the time. And a really good thing to do was to grease it on the landing to where your passengers could hardly even feel it touching down.
Right.
So there were a whole bunch of new challenges, and I loved it. I actually loved it.
Dick Scobee was modest like Hoot, and when he was asked what he flew. You know, he always answered, I'm a pilot. He never said right away, I'm an astronaut, I'm a pilot. What do you fly? Well, he would say, a truck. We load things into our vehicle and we go up to space and unload, and it's like a truck. And when you said hauling trash, that was reminded me of a big truck. But no, your passengers were brilliant, beautiful people.
Oh golly, yes, yes, and I enjoyed it. I had 10 years with them because I was old when I left NASA, and when Ray and I left NASA, and but the funny thing is, you know, in the airlines, it doesn't matter what your experience was before. You get a seniority number, and it's your date of hire,
Okay.
and you get to move up depending on your date of hire. And so I got to spend 5 years as a co-pilot, and that wasn't difficult whatsoever. That was just fine. Virtually everybody I flew with were really nice guys and nice gals. I flew with a number of women captains as well, and they were all just fine. There was one or two that I will never forget, but the majority of them were kind of interested to say, well, you know, what was it like to fly that great big truck? And we were the delivery truck to space.
Mm-hmm.
We had great big cargo bay doors that opened up,
Yeah.
and we could take up very large modules. I deployed, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 satellites altogether on my 5 missions. And it was a truck to carry things up into low Earth orbit meaning between 200 and 300 miles. And then most of these satellites fired their booster motors and took themselves up much higher. So we were a space delivery truck,
Yeah.
is what it was. And it did that job really, really well.
Oh, this is great. So to answer the question, who is the man that has flown the most airplanes, different airplanes?
Oh,
We
golly.
know it's you, and I read that it was 140 different types of airplanes.
Oh, that's an old bio.
Oh,
It's over 160. It's over 160. Now, I was, oh golly, I was disappointed. Air and Space magazine, Air and Space Smithsonian magazine, put me on their cover. And I was only the 3rd person that they had ever put on the cover of their magazine. And they titled it, Meet the Man Who's Flown Everything. And I'm thinking, oh no, I haven't flown everything. But I think now it's 164 airplanes
wow.
that I've flown. And you know, the people doing the article and all said, okay, how many airplanes have you flown? And I said, well, I don't know, it's probably over 100. They said, make us a list. I didn't have a list up till that point. And so I sat down and I made a list, and then I've been keeping it up as I fly something new. And so I think it's 164 now, is what it was. What was my favorite airplane that I've flown? And I think the number is 164 of them now. And you know, I flew F-14 Tomcats. Tom Cruise, eat your heart out. I actually got to fly those. That's what he flew in the movie Top Gun. He only got to go for a ride in the back seat.
Yeah, it was.
But this is going to surprise you, because I flew the F-4 Phantom, I flew the A-4 Skyhawk, I flew the airplane that I flew that I found to be the most fun was the Russian MiG-21 Fishbed. It's a Mach 2, 2 times the speed of sound, jet fighter, lightweight fighter. It weighed half as much as my F-4 Phantom. And it's a hot rod. Half of the body of the airplane is engine. And so you gotta love an airplane that's got that much engine.
Yeah.
And so it was a real hot rod, and it was a cool looking airplane. Had a delta-shaped wing with a horizontal tail as well. Just a really sleek looking airplane. And it was a lot of fun. It's the original lightweight fighter.
Yes, Hoot.
So that's a good one, the Russian
Yeah,
MiG-21.
So tomorrow, you're going to be the Grand Marshal for our 76th parade here in Chattanooga for the Armed Forces. The Armed Forces Parade. 76 is more a sequence of parades in Chattanooga than anywhere else in the country. and you'll be the Grand Marshal, you and Ray. It'll be great to have you there. And so you've been the Grand Marshal many times, I'm sure.
I have.
So-
Yes, I have. I have.
so-
And it's always a thrill.
Is
It's
it?
always a thrill. Yes.
So you're going to see, unless it rains on our parade,
I
you're
checked the
going to
forecast.
see. It's going to be
It's not supposed to rain tomorrow.
okay.
Not supposed to
okay.
rain tomorrow.
Okay, good. And they're going to put me in another car. Not at I was like you. No, don't not me. There are other great people. Let them go. But I think I have to, because they've made the name on the side of the car. But
You're going to have to be there, June.
I'm practicing.
Well, yeah.
I have never been in a parade. Dick Scobee led in a Grand Marshal. General Don Rodgers was a Grand Marshal. I sat on the side watching. Hello. So this time I got to be one.
You're going to be one. Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
along with you.
They're going to love you.
They're going to call it.
Everyone loves you. They're going to love you.
You have how many hours flying total? Hours?
About 14,600.
That's a lot of hours up in the sky.
100. Yes. Yeah. And so, people tend to think, okay, golly, well, you went up in a space shuttle and you guys log all that time in space, thousands and thousands of hours. No, I have 36 and a half days in space. That equals 867 hours, I think.
Okay.
So that's not anywhere near the biggest part of it. So my jet fighter time was actually about the same size as my 10 years of airline. Because in the airlines you flew a lot. You flew a whole lot. I was with Southwest Airlines, and every week I was gone 3 or 4 days. So it was a little tough on the family, but I needed a career that I could do from Murfreesboro, Tennessee.
Yeah.
And they don't need test pilots or astronauts or really even aeronautical engineers there. So I could do the airlines living anywhere.
Living anywhere.
So it worked out well.
Well, I want to share with you all this. Not only is he a hotshot pilot, a hoot, in other words, he has written a child's book. Is this focused okay for people to see? It is a child's book that he has written that is brilliant. Okay. Would you tell us what this book is about?
It's a cute story, June, and actually the motivation to write it came from the two women that were involved, Sarina Salido and Michelle Roche, who are two women that I knew from Space Fest in Tucson, Arizona. Michelle is a gifted artist, and she helped write it. Sarina helped write it, and of course I helped write it as well. And they had the idea because we talked about one day about how I take my grandson Andrew, who is now 12 and a half years old, how I take him flying in my airplane. And one of the things that really impressed them was he loves zero Gs.
Oh.
He loves zero Gs.
Yep.
And so, and what we do is I'll dive the airplane, get a little extra speed, pick the nose up about 45 or 50 degrees, and then push over to where we're floating in the cockpit. He laughs, waves his arms, he giggles. He absolutely loves weightlessness. So what'll happen now is we take off in the airplane. I'm just retracting the landing gear, and he'll say, "Can we do zero Gs?" And I'll say, "Andrew, we need some altitude first."
Yeah.
So I'm the grandfather Hoot, taking his grandson Andrew flying. That's what the first flight book is about. It's a grandfather owl, named Hoot, of course, who takes his grandson Andrew flying. And I won't spoil the whole book, but at the end of it, Andrew is flying by himself. And so it's a cute story, I think, thanks to the two ladies that were involved in it, that made it into a really cute story. And it's already picked up 2 awards.
Yes.
It's only been out since November of 24. And let's see, one of the awards I can't pronounce, but the other one was Creative Child Magazine awarded it their 2025 Book of the Year award. So it's the award-winning first flight book.
Okay. And we hope that you write about your career and your life and your wonderful marriage to Ray Sudden. and those children and your book. And speaking of books, will you grab, oops, would you grab that book underneath there? The bottom one, maybe?
Oh, the bottom one?
Yeah. I'm moving the helmet too
Silver
far.
Linings.
Silver Linings
yeah, that's your
was
book.
the book I want to give you
Oh, wonderful.
that I wrote.
Oh, golly.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it is
Oh,
the
love.
story. I first wrote this a story, Silver Linings, the Challenger 7, that crew, wonderful, all the team. Dick was the commander, and then I married Don Rodgers, and he said, "You need to write another book, a sequel. It should be my life before and after Challenger." So before is my childhood. That's a little embarrassing, and I was a rough teenager. And then after I married Don Rodgers, and he and why we moved to Tennessee is in the book. But I do want you to have that. And thank you so much for being with us today, Hoot. Anything you'd like to say that I haven't asked about?
Oh, after NASA, there was another area of aviation that I started in on, and that was air racing. Air racing at Reno. And it's the world's fastest motorsport. I did that for 18 years altogether. And I was flying unlimited category airplanes, which means any size piston engine. And so the two that I did the best in each had 3,000 horsepower and one of them went over 500 miles an hour. The year that I won the unlimited championship, I was flying a P-51 Mustang, a highly modified P-51 Mustang. The other years I was flying a Hawker Sea Fury, and I got to fly the fastest Hawker Sea Fury that ever raced Reno. And so I had 18 years of that. It's not the most sane thing in the world to be doing, because it is dangerous. We lost pilots. We lost pilots.
I think you liked fast. He likes fast.
Speed freak or adrenaline freak? Yes, yes. So anyway, but I tell people, well, if I have to replace a rocket ship for excitement, it's going to have to be something like a 500-mile-an-hour racer going around a set of pylons at about 60 feet off the ground with 8 other airplanes.
Wow.
So that's
close to the ground.
It's really close to the ground, yes. So anyway, I did that for 18 years as well.
Well, thank you for coming to Chattanooga, for joining us at the National Medal of Honor Heritage Center, and for being such a great guest. We don't get astronauts here in town very often. Ray, your wife, was a guest over at our Challenger Center here in Chattanooga one time, but we're happy to have you now, too. Thank you so much, Hoot. Thank you.
Thank you, June. It's been a pleasure. It's so great to see you again.
Thank you.
So
Yeah,
this has been
terrific.
wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you. I couldn't help but bring up Dick Scobee's name often because they're so affiliated. I haven't done that before with my interviews, but I guess it's okay. I guess you guys cut it out if you want to.
We were good friends. We were good friends. And I'll never forget the first day I went to Building 4 and walked up the stairs. First person I saw when I got on the 3rd floor of Building 4 was Dick Scobee. Never forgotten that.
Well, he was impressed with all you Navy pilots after having to try to make a carrier landing.
I was impressed with him. He flew one of the lifting bodies,
Yes, he did.
the X-24B.
He was a test pilot on the X-20, the prototype for the shuttle.
Yes, yes, paved the way for the space shuttle. So he was impressive. He was you know that. We all knew that. He was very
He was a
impressive.
good guy. We were soulmates. He was a good and a great dad. Kathy and Rich have grown up well in spite of their mother, but they're doing very well.
Yes, yes, absolutely. He was a wonderful, nice man as well.
Thanks.
Sometimes we didn't always pick that, but we sure did. We sure did with Dick Scobee.
There was a lot of rivalry between the Navy pilots and the Air Force pilots. At least that's from my point of view.
Good-natured rivalry. Good-natured rivalry. And you know, under George Abbey, the Navy did really well.
I know he
And the
favored
Air
Navy.
Force didn't do quite as well. When I was chief astronaut, there was none of that. There was none of that.
Good.
That isn't right. That
Yeah.
isn't right to pick your service for all the good deals. So I was blind to well, I wasn't blind to it. I knew what they were. But I was going to take just as good care of my Air Force guys as my Navy guys.
Good for you.
So,
Good for you.
that's one of those principles of leadership. You're there to take care of your people.
Whoa. What a story. Thank you. Thank you very much, Hoot. This has been fun. Oh, my.
I agree.
The first of the 35 shuttle astronauts, and his wife was the first of the mission specialist in that selection. Thank you. You're the best. You're good-natured to come here with us. Thank you.
Oh, golly, it's a pleasure. It's such a pleasure.